those who don't have will but have skill will always be a problem. When people think about sales, they don't really understand the hundreds of job roles that fall under the sales umbrella.
In an interview, how do you spot the top 10%er?
Sales is so based in psychology. Work to get to the top, most times with top 10%ers, happens outside of work. I think top 10%ers are risk takers. They don't have a fear of failure because risk takers make other people who are not risk takers uncomfortable.
Welcome to the Future of Selling podcast, where we dive into challenges and trends. We dive into innovations, anything that's impacting the future of sales or the sales landscape. My name is Rick Smith. I'm your host. I'm so thankful and appreciative that you guys have decided to join us today. Our guest today is Kristie Jones. Now, Kristie is the founder and principal at Kristie Jones Consulting. She works with early stage startups and also with SaaS companies who are scaling. She's really passionate about a couple of things, and it comes out in her book. We'll talk about that book in a minute. She's really passionate about hiring and retaining the top 10%ers, right? Reviving the art of sales and also designing repeatable and scalable sales processes that help organizations grow and help individuals and leaders actually be successful in their roles. So as I mentioned a minute ago, she's written a book. The name of the book is called Selling Your Way In. She sent me a copy of that, and which I, was kind of blown away. I don't know if that didn't always happen, but I thought that was just such a kind gift that she sent me. And I'm actually right in the middle of it right now, and I'm on upcoming chapter 8. So it's been a really good read, really great book. So I recommend, if you don't have it, grab it. I'm telling you, I'm a fan. And I'm really, really excited about the conversation today. So, Kristie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Excited about our conversation.
Yeah, me too. But before we get into the deep stuff, right, kind of the book and the concepts and things like that, I always like to start with just a couple of fun facts, just to open it up, let people know you're a human being, and just make it more personable. I hope that's okay with you. Good. Fun fact number 1, you're a really good athlete, and you use a ton of sports metaphors in your book. And I assume, because I've been reading it, but I assume also you use that in your coaching as well. Is that
I am a sports junkie. I know that that's not for everyone, so I am sort of sensitive. But in general, I play in a sports male-dominated industry, so a lot of times that works just fine for me. But yes, I'm a sports junkie. You can find me in front of the TV on most Saturdays and Sundays watching football, and I love basketball, college basketball particularly.
Yeah, love it. I was reading that played racquetball back in the day, so I had transitioned to tennis. Had you done the pickleball thing yet, or I'm just not interested?
After having my first pickleball experience, I haven't used my new racket yet, but my girlfriends got together for one of our I call it my tennis inner circle, as I call it. We get together monthly for girls' night out, and one of the girls had a birthday, and so she said, "Can we all play pickleball instead?" So that was my first. I never tried it before, so that was my first foray, and I was a little bit addicted. So I went out and bought a used racket at Play It Again Sports.
Yeah, love it. And I've got a little bit of a bias on pickleball. I played a couple of times. I'm like, why won't they make that ball bounce just a little bit more? Not tennis ball bounce, right? But just give it a wee bit more bounce, and it would be, anyway, I think it'd be a more fun game. But I do like it as well. So cool. Also, you are known for Kristie-isms, and you sent me all these Kristie-isms, and we're going to talk about these as we go, but you've kind of turned them into what I would call like playing cards. I want to talk more about that and find out how you use them. I think I know, but I'm ready to dig into that in a few minutes. And then also, I love this thing that I read in your book, that you have time to give anyone 30 minutes for a conversation. Has that ever gotten you in a bad spot, like from a calendar perspective, or is that always?
No, I say I'm hoping to be busy enough someday to only be able to give 15 minutes, but currently I still have time to give 30 minutes. So no, I can always squeeze people, and everybody kind of comes from referral, so it's normally a friend of a friend or something like that. So when you or recently I posted something on LinkedIn that got a lot of attention, and I had a lot of out of work salespeople reach out to me and ask for 30 minutes.
Oh, wow. Well, one, I think that's awesome that you're doing that. And secondly, I may grab 30 minutes with you at some point. So I love the idea. When I was reading the book, I like to read kind of who you're dedicating these things to, or who people dedicate their books to. You dedicate the book to your parents and also to Scott, and you talk a lot about the impact of the kind of the kitchen table MBA. Do you mind unpacking that a little bit? Talk about how your parents influenced you, and I'm assuming is Scott
Yes.
I'm assuming that's your
Yes.
brother. Is that accurate? Okay. And maybe how he impacted you as well. I love the story and love to maybe
I think
just
it was something that I
dig
didn't
into that.
really understand at the time, right? When you're in it and it's your normal dinner table conversation and you don't always spend time at other people's dinner tables, you don't know that
Yeah.
it's unusual. But it was after the fact, after sort of I had gotten into the business world myself that I realized that just by osmosis. So my mom had started out as a teacher and my dad had been a mid-level manager for what today we would say AT&T. So he worked for the United Telephone Company before Bell. And so those table conversations weren't that interesting because I don't have no memory of those whatsoever. But when I was about 12,
Right.
my dad went into the real estate business with his brother and became the owner broker of a Coldwell Banker franchise. My mom was still teaching. A couple of years later, she got her real estate license over the summer break and taught one more year and then never again. And so, there's a couple of things about real estate. So I always say, like, this is one of the worst professions ever for people. And really the only time it's funny because even though they worked in the same office, my dad was sort of working a 9 to 5 Monday through Saturday ish, but my mother was working when everybody else wasn't, right? So nights and weekends. And so a lot of times they didn't see each other during the day. And so if we could sneak in dinner, which a lot of times my dad became responsible for,
Right.
and that's where right. Though it first stopping teaching flipped our whole world upside down. My dad now was responsible for orthodontist appointments and getting us to softball practice on time and cooking dinner. Um, but when they got together, they needed to not only catch up about what was going on with us as kids, but also like what had gone on professionally throughout the day. And so the table conversation revolved around, buyers and sellers, commission checks, listings, the business, the industry. And both my parents were very involved in the state and local associations. And so, I think like we didn't know it wasn't normal until we went out, my brother and I went out to find jobs. And it's no surprise when you look back that, I decided to take the leadership route that my father had taken and my brother took the individual contributor route that my mother had taken. And when we, had talked about it, over the years, neither of us would change places with the other. He thinks I'm crazy. He's like, I can't believe you rely on other people for your income. And I was like, I can't believe you're like, like you would just be completely reliant on yourself. So we would always have this debate, but neither of us would switch places, which was really interesting. But a lot of the things, as a result of that, I say that we grew up differently and I felt an obligation and it took me a while to figure it out till friends started saying to me like, hey, like, we don't know what you know. We didn't grow up the way you grew up. Most people don't have, business acumen and financial literacy, and we had both. And so, I don't think it's any surprise that we both ended up in sales. I think there were, I have a journalism degree, by the way. So I always tell people, I said, I never set out and intended to be in the sales environment. And the first job out of college was in retail sales, at a department store. So, and I tell people I've been on, I was on John Barrows's podcast a while back. And I said he has a smaller daughter and he wrote a book on sales, a children's book on sales. And so we had gone down that path of talking about it a little bit.
Cool.
And he said, after reading part of my book, he said, I assume that you advocate for parents having very transparent financial conversations with their children. And I said, I do, because, we're not teaching that in school. Like no one's teaching that, like even in like in high school, maybe you got like personal budgeting or whatever. But, people like that's still like a little bit of a taboo topic. And I say to people, like, if we all discussed it, we'd all probably be more financially stable. We'd be making more money. We'd be better investors. We would know how to handle negotiations probably better. But it's one of those taboo topics that people just don't talk about.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, and when I was reading it and kind of, hearing you tell the story in the book, I just kept thinking about how much it must have impacted you as well as all the financial piece and the financial literacy that you took from that. But to actually see your parents kind of step out of the comfort zone of a 9 to 5 job, being a full-time employee for someone else, step out of that comfort zone and into the stretch zone, and then everything that goes along with that. I mean, that had to be, again, I think probably just really inspiring and part of what, kind of made
We
you
were
who
adults.
you
I
are
don't think we
today.
really understood the risk that with our family had taken. That my dad had kind of put us in this position, because we had never. I mean, like
Yeah.
you said, like they were just going to work every day and getting a set paycheck every 2 weeks. I don't think we really understood the risk
Yeah.
and the fact that really like my mother went into a. I mean, for someone who'd never been in sales, who had an English degree, taught English. She lived overseas and grew up and grown up in Europe, so she spoke Spanish fluently. So she also taught Spanish, but she taught English and Spanish. And for her to go from that situation to 100% commission sales rep, I mean, I don't really know. I very few women, right?
Yeah.
And then that was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Until like I got to be an adult, I
Mhm.
don't really think I understood the risk that was being taken. But it also put our family in a different
Right.
position, right? Financially, the position that, I say like my parents paid cash for college for my brother and me. We came out of college without student loans, but I
Yeah.
hadn't saved for it. But business had been, gotten so good when we were around the time we went to college that they were able literally to pay cash for college. So it made a difference. It made a difference in our family.
Wow.
But yeah,
Incredible.
I think one of the reasons why I work with early stage startup founders is I have like a little bit of a soft spot for the risk takers out there who, leave their comfortable 9 to 5 and go out and try to sell their first $1 million and then try to get, some VC money after that. But that's I always say, like, I understand that you've probably mortgaged your house, right? You probably the lien on your house. You've probably done some things.
Right.
You've borrowed money from friends and family at this point to do something that you are truly, you truly believe in and are passionate about.
Yeah, it's incredible to see people do that, and but you've done that as well, right? I mean, you've stepped out. I mean, you were working as an FTE, and and I mean, as saying full time employee, but you were a leader and you're doing some different things, but you were working for another company. So, kind of use that maybe as a transition to tell me about dive in a bit deeper to Kristie K. Jones Consulting. What do you do? Who do you serve? What type of results are you seeing? Those kind of things, just so people
Yeah,
kind of
I've been kind
understand
of
that.
living in the startup space as a sales leader when I was a W-2 employee. And so when I went out on my own and started my own consultancy, that was the niche. Like that was, I call my swim lane. So that's my swim lane. So really, B2B SaaS, startup founders between 1 and 5 million in revenue who are trying to move from founder-led selling into building out their first sales team. I kind of come in, I say, as an extra set of expertise hands and help them, build out and formalize and document all the processes that are right now just in their head. Nobody ever writes anything down.
Yeah.
They're like, this is just how
Yeah.
this just worked for you. And I'm like, great, did you write it down? They're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, let's do that now. I feel like I'm writing somebody's autobiography a lot of time, right? Yeah, I'm like, nobody writes anything down. I come in and build out all those processes, sometimes even, help them purchase their first CRM system, make sure the CRM system is customized and tied to all those processes. And then I begin the process of helping them hire those people. So before we go hire sales rep number 1, 2, or 3,
Right.
we need to have some kind of a playbook and framework for them to work through. I love what I do. Everybody's so appreciative. And I really love, like, that is my niche.
Yeah.
And I love being in that 1 to 5. It's very different than going from 5 to 10 or 10 to 50 million or, 50 million to 250. So that's really the expertise that I have, is helping people. I do some other things outside of that. I do some executive coaching, and I do some interim sales leadership from time to time as well. But in general, I'm just helping you figure out the playbook and the framework so that we can go hire and start to build out your sales team.
Yeah, tremendous amount of value there, right? Because I mean, you just like you said, I mean, typically that's going to be a founder-led initiative, and I mean, I've worked for a couple of startups in the past, and I mean, like I remember one I thought it was much bigger than this before I joined it, but once I joined it, I found that I was like employee number 12, and and at that time it was kind of founder-led, right? And there's just so much they can do. So bringing in that expertise to take them to the next level, I mean, that's definitely high value. So what kind of led you to start your own company and then ultimately write the book?
Yeah, I got fired. So that, that was definitely the impetus for that. A reorganization happened at the last W-2 company I was working for, and I really was in search of my next sales leadership role. So I was starting to meet with VCs that had invested in companies that I had been a part of in the startup world, and other former, individuals, partners that I'd worked with companies. And really, like, I was in no way intending to start my own business. After having grown up the way I grew up, I knew how hard it was. My dad had bypass surgery at 53. I was convinced that was stress related. And there was a whole bunch of things that had happened. And of course, the real estate is either really great or really bad. And so I'd had a jaded view of that situation. But
Sure.
I say very openly that the universe conspired to do something different than I was intending to do. And all of these things started to happen where relationships that I was meeting, follow-up calls were happening, where a major general partner at the biggest VC in Missouri called me, said, we just invested in a cybersecurity company. He's moving from founder-led selling to building out his first sales team. He doesn't know what he's doing. Would you have coffee? And I said, of course.
Right.
I have 30 minutes for everyone. And I gave him 90 minutes. And at the end, as we were walking out of the Starbucks, he said, I'm pretty much not qualified to do anything you told me that needs to be done. Who do you think can help me do this? And I was still employed at the time. I knew I was transitioning out. They'd asked me to stay on for 3 months while they rebuilt the team in Phoenix, Arizona from St. Louis. And so I said, I can, without almost stopping myself. And so that was the first ball in a big snowball that happened. And before I ever left the W-2 job, at the end of that 3 months, I had 3 clients, I was helping build out the first sales team of the cybersecurity company, who 18 months later was bought by Cisco. So that was a major success, number one. And then ended up getting some fractional sales leadership jobs at 2 other companies who were, again, being founder led. But the founder was ready to step out of that role and let somebody else take over.
Wow. It's amazing. Yeah. And then at some point, so you get into this and you're doing the consulting, you're doing the fractional sales leader. And then at some point you decide to write the book. What kind of made you decide, hey, I need to, was it because nobody ever documents anything?
It was not that, but that's a better story than the one I'm going to tell you. I've actually been approached during pandemic by a company called Udemy. So an e-learning online learning company. They were starting their business division. So originally Udemy was started by, I always say, I use this really bad example where, if your expertise is in building birdhouses, you can, go on Udemy and create a birdhouse building course, and they'll host it. You'll get a certain percentage of the revenue that you generate. But they were starting a business side, a B2B side, where they were going to sell the business courses to companies. And they had found me on LinkedIn and reached out and approached me about doing a course on sales in their sales catalog. So I ended up during 2020 and 2021 creating a prospecting course for them. Prospecting Fundamentals, a very basic, entry-level sales prospecting course. And so at that point, I was like, I had done all of this work. They'd given me an instructional designer. It'd taken, about 6-7 months. But I had all this content. And so I was like, well, let's make a book, right? And so I hired a book coach. And about a couple months in, I told her, I said, I'm really struggling. I'm not enjoying this. Something's off. Give me 30 days to try to figure that out. So 30 days later, I came back to her and I said, I'm writing a dumb how-to book. And I said, there are a lot of people out there that write how-to sales books that probably can do it better than I can do it. And I'm not enjoying this. And she said, okay, well, does that mean are we scrapping the book idea, entirely? And I said, no. I said, I think one of the things I'm continually seeing is sales professionals putting themselves in the wrong sales role and then limiting themselves from getting to the top 10%. And I said, I think, when people think about sales, they don't really understand the hundreds of job roles that fall under the sales umbrella, and some of which people don't even think that is a sales role. And so I said, I think I want to write a book that incorporates the information that I learned as a child, the things that I gained in a sales, growing up in a sales entrepreneurial household, along with the things that I've been seeing as a consultant. And so I started to write a book that I really was proud of and that I was really excited about, and that all of a sudden it became a lot easier. And so that's when I knew I had hit on something. I talked to a few people, and, everybody said, there's really nothing like this out there. I'm calling it kind of like the career sales guide manual, if you will, but not really anything out there like this. So that's how the book came about.
Yeah. Well, again, the book is really good. I can, and, I'm interviewing you now. I can feel your energy coming through, but even in the book, sometimes you read a book and you can kind of feel the author is kind of sitting in an easy chair, leaned back, just writing. And then you can feel the energy come through at times. And with yours, I could feel it. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, she is really on this thing. So clearly you were in your lane, which is part of your thing, right? Being in your lane. I also like the fact that you did break it out by, one seller is not like every other seller. You've got the account executive, you've got the SDR, you've got customer success, which I'm the client customer or chief customer officer at Conquer, and that's where I've spent most of my career is on the customer side of the world, but also huge piece of sales, right? And not everybody recognizes
a majority of companies, the majority of revenue comes from renewals and expansion. And we give all of this attention. I sit in these board meetings and all everybody wants to talk about is net new. And I get it because it's early stage startups. But even after the first year or two, the customer success team is generating more revenue than the net new sales team. And it will always be the case. And yet we never give that, we said like, sometimes it feels like the customer success team is the redheaded stepchild of sales or not even considered part of the sales org. People don't even think about it, but I'm like, I say to people, I go, do you understand how much revenue they're generating versus the net new sales team?
No, I agree. I mean, if you can't renew clients, you can expand them. If you can't renew and expand, you probably can't land net new. It's really hard to do if you kind of don't have that credibility behind you. So anyway, I thought that was really nice the way you broke that out. Let's talk about this idea of the top 10%. I know that was one of the things you really wanted to hone in on. So what defines a top 10%er in a sales role? How do you think about that? Is it just the numbers, or kind of what are you thinking?
I think it first and foremost is the numbers. So sales is an objective sport. We're keeping score, and it's very easy to keep score. There's nothing subjective about sales at all. So it's people who figured out how to hit their quota, how to get to be the number 1 or 2 person on the team. You're doing things better than your coworkers and competitors. It's obvious. But I also think that, when you start to talk about additional traits of top 10 percenters, they're also doing things. I say the work to get to the top, most times with top 10 percenters happens outside of work, right? So I always use the example. I'm like, Susan's sitting next to Kay, and, Susan's saying everything that Kay is saying, but yet she's only at 60% of quota. And she goes home frustrated every day going, but I don't understand. Like, I'm doing exactly what Kay's doing, but I'm not getting the results that Kay's getting. The fact that matters, you're probably not doing exactly what Kay's doing, right? Kay probably has cut alcohol out of her life. She's probably at the gym 5 or 6 days a week. She's probably going, getting 8 hours of sleep. She probably has a mindfulness or spiritual type of practice. She's probably surrounding herself with the right people. She's probably a lifelong learner, right? She's probably constantly improving her professional and personal development and taking responsibility for that. And so when I, over the course of several, if even going back to my retail days, the first 8 or so years out of college I spent in retail, the people who were doing the best were also taking care of themselves in a different way. Like they understood the mind-body connection. They understood the physical and mind connection, and how that impacted their professional lives.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, I completely agree. I have a mastermind that I lead on. It's called Let's Grow, but it's basically how do we grow? How do we become? How do we get on this process of kind of moving toward the next thing? And the people who do that and do that consistently, I think, are always top, at the kind of the top of their game. In an interview, how do you spot the top 10%er? I mean, other than, again, numbers and things like that, but I mean, how do you know that you've got the real thing?
I mean, I ask them, certain questions. Some of them, are leading me down that path for sure. One of the things I ask everybody in an interview is tell me about the art of sales, I call it. So tell me about sales soft skills training that you've been provided by prior employers. The number one answer I get is I haven't been. And so the follow-up question to that is, so what have you done for yourself? And I ask it just that way. Yeah. Right. And if people hesitate and they don't know what they've done or they can't, then I'm like, I know I'm not dealing with a top 10%er. Another question I ask is, tell me about the last time you learned something new. What was it? How long ago was it? And how did you learn it? And then I ask people about who their advisory board is, right? Because the Kristie-ism card you have in front of you says your circle matters, right? And you can't surround yourself with people who are not ambitious, who are not taking care of their bodies, who are doing things, off hours that aren't going to benefit them on hours, and think that, those are the people that are, are in your circle. Then you're probably not going to get to the top 10%. It's more than just, I no longer use that phrase. It's more than just you need to be the least smart person in the smart room. It's more than that, right? You need people who are going to go on the journey with you, who are not going to sabotage you, who are going to support you, who are not going to criticize you for the hours that you work or the things that you do or the fact that you're going to drink, club soda and lime instead of vodka and tonic, or
Right.
gin and tonic. So, I think it's all of those type of things that, Nick, there's certain questions you can't ask, but I'm hearing more and more as I ask certain types of questions. I ask people about risk taking. I think top 10 percenters are risk takers, right? They don't have a fear of failure. And so one of the questions I ask it either one of two ways. The first question I ask, it could be just as simple as, tell me the last time you took a risk. The other way I ask it is, tell me the last time someone said to you, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just did that. Yeah. Right? Because risk takers make other people who are not risk takers uncomfortable. Right. And so a lot of times they're like, I can't believe you're going to quit your job and go start your own company. Right. Or I can't believe that you just said that to your boss, or I can't believe you said that to a customer. Yeah. And so again, it's more than just confidence. You read people, you're reading people well, you're creative about how you go about doing things. You have a strategic, mindset. And I say to people, you can interview for this. Just like I can interview, I consider startup fit a competency that I can interview for. So I have about 6 or 7 startup fit questions, right? So, you can interview for all of these type of things. I say we're not looking for characteristics, we're looking for traits. There's a difference. Right. And we're also looking for competencies, right? But people who are, the other thing that top 10 percenters do is they're accountable. Right? A lot of people aren't accountable. And so I ask a question, tell me the last time you missed quota and what were the circumstances surrounding it. I will never forget a candidate I interviewed recently, and she said to me the last quarter, she's like, I knew I was leaving, and so I just didn't care anymore. I was like, wow. That's like I was like, I can't believe you just said that out loud. And she was trying to be authentic and, and honest, but it cost her the job. Yeah. Right. Because, and again, I get it. Psychologically, I get it. But even if you're looking for a new job or you're done with this one, top 10 percenters don't check out like that. Right. Because they understand that they built brand and reputation and that their next job is probably going to come from their network. And the next job could be, and the 2 jobs from that could come from the current leader who leaves that company and goes to another company. How often do we hear when, I hear a lot from top 10 percenters. This is one of the early questions I know. I'm like, how did you end up at X company? Oh, my boss from the previous company left and went to that company and brought me with them. That's a sign.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So what would you, so there are a lot of good interview questions. I don't think I've gotten to it yet. Do you have those interview questions in your book or some of those interview questions where people can use them? And if they so choose to buy the book?
Not, but I do have a hiring guide on my website. So at KristieKJones.com, there's a resources tab, there's a worksheets tab, and I have, it's called Your Gut is Wrong.
Right. I like that.
It outlines my hiring process and interview questions along the way.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to say that my next question was going to be, okay, let's say I was a sales leader and I'm trying to upgrade my team. What would you recommend I do? Maybe it's go to your website and find your interview questions and things, or maybe there's a better answer than that. So again, I'm a sales leader. I got a team I'm trying to upgrade. We're not doing well enough. Maybe I'm new to the company. What would you tell that sales leader?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways. I call it the easy way and the hard way. The easy way is to terminate people who you don't think are the right fit for the situation and hire A players. It sounds like that's the easy way. It takes some time and money. But if I break these in, and the other way would be to train them, right? Is to first start by providing them the art of sales training instead of the science of sales, which is all right now data, automation, AI. Yeah. And again, run people through an assessment, right? There are plenty of sales assessments out there. If you're not sure, and I break things into 2 categories. I'm very binary: will and skill. Okay. Right? Will and skill. Those who don't have will but have skill will always be a problem. Right? Once they hit their quota, they'll coast. They don't care about the 120%. They just care about the 100% or the 99%. So if they don't have the will, but they're skillful, that's probably going to be someone that will, need to roll off the payroll at some point. If they're really trying, if they've got a lot of will, then the question is, can we provide them the skill to get them to the next level? And again, that's the leader's responsibility to make that attempt. So, I mean, as sales leaders, we walk in, I just call it inherit people, right? We inherit people all the time.
Yeah.
And in 90 days, I try to put people in a couple of categories. The best case scenario, the top 10%ers have will and skill, right? And so you've got the will skill group, which are going to be your leaders in the, on your team. Then you've got people who have the will, but just were never properly trained. That's not their fault, right? That's a leadership problem that can be resolved.
Yeah.
But the people who, do have the ability, but just don't have the drive, I think probably it's in the book and it may be in a Kristie-ism card, but, I say we can't motivate the unmotivated, right? But we can inspire the self-motivated. And so there's a big difference. So it took me till almost in my 40s to figure out. I was, sometimes I was just like, I'm not always the cheerleader, but sometimes I, would come in and I would run the contest and give my pom-poms and, I had the sales fairy. I had my sales fairy outfit and my wand, and I put some, glitter into a salt jar and sprinkled it over people's head and waved the wand to try to, make the mojo happen. I was trying to create mojo. But then I finally figured out, I was working double time, particularly with the people who just weren't self-motivated. And there was nothing I could do, right? Like the contest didn't matter. The glitter didn't matter. The positive reinforcement didn't matter. They just weren't self-motivated. And those were just people I chose not to work with going forward.
Yeah. Gotcha. So is the will and skill quote, is that one of your Kristie-isms as well? Or is that,
it is not a Kristie-ism. It should be, I need to come up with a good Kristie-ism for that. Yep.
Yeah. I think it might be a good. How do we use, I'm interested, I've got it later, but I'll hit it while we're here. How do you use the Kristie-isms in your coaching and in your consulting? I mean, you got like I've got the stack here beside me, which I'm in love with. And there's probably 50 a lot of, I bet. There. Looks like.
Yeah. I had to find I was trying to figure out clever ways to make certain themes stick. And so, and then I started putting them in phrases that I thought were entertaining. And then I was hearing people repeat them back to me. And that's when I kind of knew Kristie-isms had started, because people would say, hunters don't want to, give birth to the baby or whatever, or, farmers just want to raise the baby. And certain things that they just stuck with people. But I was using them to try to get muscle memory around the concept, right? And mental memory around the concept. And so I just kept saying them over and over and over, and they were entertaining. And so people start repeating them back to me. And I was like, okay, so it's working. It's working. They're remembering. That's what I needed, is something catchy so they would remember.
Right. Got it. Do you actually, I mean, since you put them in cards, do you actually use them in your consulting gigs and in your meetings, and kind of throw it out and go, okay, what's your feedback, or how would you, I've got one, decisions are free, consequences are not. What would you do with
Yeah. I talk a lot about making poor decisions, and that one ties very closely to my other Kristie-ism, which is panic causes bad decisions, right? And then decisions are free and consequences are not. The number one bad decision that people make is not having enough pipeline to hit quota or to hit the revenue target, right? Yeah. And so, an anemic pipeline is never going to get you where you need to go. It's the decision to not prospect, right? And the decision to call an existing customer, or a decision to do a check-in call with somebody in the pipeline, versus the discipline to go out and prospect. And by the way, while we're talking about it, that's one of the number one traits of top 10%ers. They have discipline. They're disciplined people. They're disciplined in their personal life, meaning they, the alarm goes off at 5:30 in the morning. They get up and go to the gym. They put the right things in their bodies. I mean, all of that requires discipline. Right. And so the different, the people who have full pipelines have the discipline to time block prospecting 2 hours a day, and then hold themselves accountable to doing it. It's not enough just to time block it. You actually have to have the discipline and accountability to do it.
Yeah. Got it. No, I love the card. And I really love all of them, to tell you the truth. And so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to use them. I'm assuming that, and I'm just kind of showing them here, right? If somebody's watching this, I'm assuming that somebody could probably get this off your website and incorporate them in there. I could see taking that into one of my staff meetings and going, hey, okay, here's your Kristie-ism for today. Decisions are free, consequences are not. Use it maybe as an opener and say, help me understand how this may impact our gross retention, net retention, and the efforts you're putting toward it this year. or this quarter or whatever, right?
I think I mean, people have favorites, like you said. People have favorite ones that they love to, but really, I'm like, I just want people to stop and think. I think sometimes we're busy always working in the business and not on the business, or working in situation but not on ourselves. And so I think, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does the Kristie-ism mean to you? Like, how could that possibly change your behavior? The decisions and consequences one was actually one that I started using with my son. So that was not actually initially a purposeful one. Because I mean, as he was growing up and going, through high school and college, there were decisions I thought he was making. And I just said to him, like, every decision has consequences, good and bad, right? So, you can make a good decision that comes with very good consequences, and it's, the decision to play Xbox versus study, right? Or the decision to, take a risk and ask for the promotion at work versus just to sit back and hope that it's going to come. But every decision and again, by the way, not making a decision is a decision. Right. Yeah. And so a lot of times, like, my son is a non-conflict kid. I'm not sure that's definitely from his father's side. Sometimes I look at him, I'm like, that's totally your father's side. But he doesn't do conflict. He has trouble with constructive conflict. And so a lot of times I say to him, I'm like, hey, you needed to defend yourself in that situation. Now he's out in the working world. He's like, in the, fully adulted and in the working world, but still young, still in his mid-20s. And I say, hey, like, when you're like, he would call me and be like, I got, my boss, I got in trouble today. My boss, she called me, this happened with one of the customers or this, that. And I said, but so the way you're explaining it, it sounds like it was a miscommunication, but not an intentional thing. He's like, well, right. And I said, but you didn't say that. Right. And so that decision to not defend yourself, I said, it doesn't have to sound like, doesn't have to sound defensive. It just has to say, hey, this is actually how the conversation and what was intended. It definitely got misconstrued or miscommunicated. And so, that's a lesson for me to learn and do better next time. But I said, by just saying, okay, and, getting off the Teams meeting, I said, you're not giving her a chance to also, like, to know what really goes on behind the scenes. Like, there's always two sides to every story. So that one really started with Logan because I said, hey, listen, like, everything you do is going to have an output, right? That input is going to have an output, and you want to make sure that that output benefits you.
Yeah, no, I've had similar conversations with my girls back in the day, very much like that. So I love them. And here's kind of, if somebody's looking, here's the whole deck. And what a great one. Stalled is not a sales stage. There's another one in here. Success begets success, I think is what it is, which is when I saw her, I'm like, I've said that for years. It's awesome. But just the ability to take those and especially if you're a leader of a team, to be able to take those into a staff meeting or whatever it is, because if you can get people to process that information, right, in a meaningful way, all of a sudden you begin to change the way people think, the way they feel, and the way they act, behave, and perform. So anyway, just kudos to you. I think they're awesome. I think they're great. Cool. Well, I'll stop talking about that.
We can go on all day. I've got go on all day about
that. Well, talk about the art of sales and soft skills. And you said that the art of sales is becoming extinct. Unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that? And which soft skills do you think are the most powerful versus the ones that are missing today that we're not seeing enough of?
Yeah, I think in general, I've seen this over the last few years, right? As data has become more, readily available, as AI has come onto the scene, as automation has come onto the scene, I think leaders are now sort of leading through data. And I'm hearing again that interview question I asked that I'm always so disappointed in the answer, which is, what kind of soft skills training have you been provided? And they say nothing. It's communication, it's persuasion, it's negotiation. I have a webinar that I did a while back, and I talk about this often. Like, the culture of accountability goes beyond just the company. You can also hold prospects accountable, but people don't know how to do that. Sales reps don't know how to hold a prospect accountable. It sounds like scary and icky, like, well, what do you mean hold them accountable? Like, I'm relying on them to pay my rent, but we can hold people accountable inside the organization, but also outside the organization. I just think all of those type of, objection handling, right? I teach, we handle objections by asking questions to seek to better understand. right? That's the Kristie-ism for objection handling. But yet those people talk their way out of an objection, which never works, sounds defensive. But, I see leaders all the time, even if you're going to provide some objection handling training, they normally teach you to talk your way out of the objection, which doesn't ever work. And so I just think there's so many, sales is so based in psychology, right? So I have a minor in psychology. I am a true crime junkie. And people are like, I can't believe you watch this stuff. And I said, why people do what they do. I go, this is all about sales. And even if it's cutting up your neighbor and putting them in deep freeze,
Right.
or I just came back from a conference in DC, and one of the keynote speakers was a gentleman who, at a period of time not too long ago, had the #1 Michelin star restaurant in the world. And he wrote a book called Unreasonable Hospitality.
I think I've read that book.
It's amazing. Yeah. I haven't read it yet because I didn't know he existed until then. Yeah. He said the #1, he said, I did some research when I got into the restaurant business, and all of the top Michelin star restaurants were run by chefs, people who were culinarily professionally trained as chefs. And he said, I was a front of the house guy, not a back of the house guy. And so I was like, how will I be able to compete with these other restaurants without having a culinary background, even if I hire the best culinary chef I can find? And so he decided that the experience needed to be the differentiator. And he said, one of the examples he gave, which I just thought was amazing, which was, he said, he asked the audience, there were about 350 of us or 500 of us in the audience. And he said, how many of you got engaged at a restaurant? And people like 10 maybe raised their hand and said yes. And he pointed a guy out in the audience who was sitting across the aisle from me, and he said, and did they give you champagne? And the guy said no. And he goes, oh. He's like, you're kidding, right? Like, you didn't get any champagne? Like, they didn't give you free champagne? He goes, no. Yeah. And so he goes, okay, well, that was supposed to happen. He goes, that was supposed to happen. So that was a big miss. But he said, that's just sort of commonplace if someone gets engaged at a restaurant. So we were giving people champagne. But I asked the staff, how could we take that to the next level? What would the next level look like of that? And he said, his restaurant's in New York on Madison Avenue. And he said, across the street was the Tiffany's headquarters. And he said, so I walked over one day and started knocking on doors till I found the CMO, the chief marketing officer, told her who I was and told her I had an idea that I thought would benefit her. Yeah. And what he asked for was 2,000 Tiffany champagne glasses, 2 in a box. And so he finally convinced her to do this. And then, so going forward, anybody who got engaged was served champagne in these Tiffany glasses. They didn't understand that at the time, but after they were done, they took them back to the kitchen, they washed them, they put them in the Tiffany box, put the ribbon on it, and gave it to him as an engagement gift. Yeah. And he said, when people stop me or, I'm like, oh my gosh, this happened at your restaurant. He said, nobody ever remembers what the hell they had for dinner. Nobody can tell me what they had for dinner. I have no idea what they ate, but they remember that. Yeah. And so at the end of his keynote, out of nowhere, one of the people who was putting on the conference said, he goes, oh, hold on just a second, I'm not done. She handed him a bottle of champagne and he handed it to the guy that didn't get it as an engagement. Yeah, that's cool. Right. And so I'm like, it's so those awesome things, it's all of those, it's the little things like that. So when you talk about a top 10 percenter, reading a book like that, if everybody went out and read Unreasonable Hospitality, which has nothing to do, he said, how many of you, spent time in the restaurant industry? By the way, a large percentage, I already knew this, 90% of the hands went up in the room. A large percentage of people in sales grew up in hospitality in some way, shape, or form. So anyway, I thought, you know what, there's lots of things, and that made me think, how can I make this again? It was the Maya Angelou quote, right? Forget what you did, but then never forget how it made them feel. And so he goes, when people tell me their stories of being in my restaurant and how I impacted something, he had story after story I could go on, but the guy who was headed to the airport, stopped by for lunch, was headed to the airport and realized he hadn't gotten his daughter the teddy bear with the I Love New York shirt on it. And somebody on the staff ran out, got the bear and gave him the teddy bear. And he said, he goes to see a grown man cry. And he was like, he goes again, he goes, that guy probably has no idea what he had for lunch. But he remembers what the people cared enough. And he said, it cost us a little bit more. And he took it to, he actually created a position and he had a cutesy name for it. But basically, like, it was the director of customer experience or something like that, right? And he literally, like, this person was just like hovering in the corner, waiting for a service person or somebody in the whether it was a busboy who was clearing dishes and overheard something. This person's sole responsibility was to make dreams come true, basically, the customers that were in the restaurant. But that's what top 10, that's what top 10% looks like, right? Excellence in everything you do, even beyond. And he knew he was not going to win. And I would say he understood his superpower, right? Not everybody understands his superpower. He knew his superpower was going to be great food, but not number one in the world Michelin star food. He knew his superpower was going to be making people, the way people felt when they left his restaurant, not the way their tummies felt.
Well, and you kind of talk about, or I think that's what you're talking about in the book when you're talking about, hey, what's your secret weapon? And it really caused me to think, because I'm like, wow, I wonder what my secret weapon is. I mean, I think I might know, but I don't know that for sure. I would say, and especially as we're drawn to I know we're getting to the end of our time. I would say if somebody's listening to the podcast, they should go grab your book. And because I read a lot of books, right? But not all of them make me pause and think and consider. And then the other cool thing is you've got like a downloadable guide.
Yes, please download the workbook, because I call it Getting Quiet with Yourself.
Yeah. I think it's good. And to me, and again, when you think about the top 10 percenters, I know when I think about them, I think top 10 percenters are always on the path to becoming. Yeah. Right? They kind of have this understanding that excellence always lies in the distance, and no matter where they're at, they're not quite there yet. They're not looking for perfection, because perfection is limiting, right? But continuous improvement, that's liberating. I mean, that's how you get there. So anyway, I think that's exciting.
I think there's a Rickism in there about. It was a Rickism about continuous improvement in the future. I think you can work to make a Rickism out of that.
All right, I'm making a set of cards. I like it. I'm gonna create some cards and send them to you. See what you think. So, all right. Well, real quickly, I like to leave people with a few key takeaways, and I think one of the key takeaways from my standpoint: get the book, read it, right? But from your perspective, if I were a seller, right, and I'm motivated and I'm hungry, but I know that I'm not yet in that top 10%. What are 3 things that you could say? Go do this, go do that, and go do the other, and then you'll hit that 10%.
Yeah. Go top 10% to lunch. Right. And don't ask them about their professional life. Ask them about their personal life. I think you'll be surprised what you might hear. For like you said, take responsibility for your professional and personal development. You have to probably know areas that you're struggling in. And again, I'm also a good to great person. So I say, like, don't take your F skill and think you can make it an A skill. Take your C plus, your B minus, your B plus skill, and do what needs to be done in order for that, to become an A skill. And then I do have this concept of discipline, right? Like, what things do you need to be more disciplined in your personal and your professional life? I think a lot of, I am, again, going back to my child, when we were growing up, I was a big proponent of want versus need, because we would go to Target and he would want Pokemon cards. But I would explain to him that I know you want them, but you don't need them. Like, they are not going to make your life, they'll make your life better in the short term, but not exponentially better in the long term. And so, I think a lot of us live in the want, but not the need. And so, what do you really need to do to get, do you want to be a top 10%er first off, right? Not everybody wants to put the work in, right? And that's fine. So I would say, that's why I say, like, I like that concept of getting quiet with yourself. Get quiet and honest with yourself. If you're like, I made the decision a lot of years ago to have a lifestyle business, right? I vacillated with like, am I going to hire, employees? Am I going to try to take this thing to the next level? And I decided that really I loved being someone who got her hands dirty, and I didn't want to get too far away from the business. I liked being a solopreneur who had 1099s, but I had to get quiet with myself, and then I had to come to accept it, right? And then I had to feel that there was no shame around it for me to be able to say to people like, well, are you going to, how far are you going to grow this thing? And I said, I'm not going to grow this thing. I have a lifestyle business and I love what I do. And I love the place I've taken it to, but that's where I want to take it. And I need to feel no shame around that. if you read the book and you get the workbook, please do that. But I mean, one of the first things I ask you to do is really kind of get quiet with yourself and, what are you willing to do to get to what level? And if you don't want to be a top 10%er, but you want to be in the top 80%, that's fine too. Everything's going to take some level of work. It even takes work to be in the bottom 50%, right?
True.
So yeah, I think those kind of things. And, again, like find your tribe, right? Your circle does matter. Make sure you're surrounding yourselves with people that have have similar aspirations and goals as you do.
Yeah. Okay. I love those. So take a top 10%er to lunch, and don't just talk to them about their business life, but what are they doing in their personal life, right? Take responsibility for your development. Make sure you're inserting discipline both in your personal and professional life. And the last one, kind of number 4, said pay attention to your tribe. Make sure you've got one, but pay attention to who you're hanging out with, because you're probably not going to, if you're hanging out with, whatever, you're probably not going to get to where you want to go. So make sure your tribe is going the same place you want to go. So incredible. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. I want to stay connected with you. I'm going to finish the book, and then I want to reach back out to you and have the 30-minute conversation. So thanks much. Appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you again soon.
Rick. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.